Okay. Hello. Welcome to the channel. This is my first video here. Let me check my notes, make sure I say everything correctly, because I want to make sure. Yeah, okay. Hello, welcome to the channel. This is the first video that I've recorded for this new project that I'm trying out. I hope it's in focus. Still I'm not very used to recording myself on a camera. I've talked to my phone before, but obviously that's not quite the same thing. But I think I got the focus right. If it's not, just bear with me. Sorry about that. But as long as you can hear me, I think that should be the good part. And I think the mic is working on here, so should be good. Okay, this is going to be a channel, and I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing with it yet, but it's basically going to be a space for me to talk about books, and because I don't get to talk about books enough. I think I write about them a lot, but I don't get to talk about them, and like just the act of physically talking to them, even if it's like to a camera and not to a person, it's still kind of a fun experience for me. So I want to try that out. This video, I thought I'd start my book channel with an exploration, a review of the books that I've read so far in 2021. So the books that I've read, because June is ending now, the books that I read in the first half of 2021. And I made sure I got to this number before I recorded this video. It's a nice round 30. So I'm going to try to make this so that I could make this a 30 books in 30 minutes video. I have no idea how closely I'll adhere to that timeline, but we'll just have to see. But I'll try to hit it as much as I can. Let me see if I can see my timer. Okay, good. I can see how much time, I can see how much time I've been talking for. So I'm just going to go into it. I'm going to review the books one by one in chronological order with one exception, and give a 5-star scale rating, and then just my thoughts about it. So let's get started. Okay, oh, also, because I am not a videographer, my brother is, he's very good at that, but I'm not, and I am not comfortable enough with editing software, and also I'm just impatient with the time it takes to upload and download and whatever. So I am not going to be doing this in more than one cut, so it's just going to be one continuous shot of me talking for like 35 minutes, because I don't want to have to cut it or do anything to it. So yeah, if I mess up, it's probably going to still be in here. So just keep that in mind, bear with me, and hopefully this goes well. This is video number 1. Okay, so let's get started. We are, I see, it looks like 2 minutes, almost 3 minutes into the video. So let's see if we can get this, if I can finish the 30th book by minute 33 of the video. Okay, again, chronological order. So book number 1. I started reading this book a few days into the year, like the day after New Year's, and this one I read on a Kindle, so I don't have a physical copy of it, but all the books that I read on Kindle, I've got their covers pulled up on my iPad here, hopefully, that are visible, because a lot of them have really nice covers, so it's a shame that I don't have physical copies. But the first one is Leviathan Wakes, the first book in the Expanse series, which so good. I'm so glad I started my year of reading off on that book, because it was amazing. It was, it's the beginning of a really long series, which I haven't finished yet, by the way. It's the beginning of a really long series, but it was super good. It was really approachable. I like sci-fi. I thought before, I think my favorite sci-fi book was The Martian, but The Martian goes very, very much into the scientific details, and it's about the science. Leviathan Wakes and The Expanse is not as much about the science. There's definitely science in it, but I think it's a lot more, it's just this big, grand, sweeping epic that happens to be in this futuristic, sciencey lens, and there's science involved, but it's not super, super intense, which I liked. I have no problem with, hard science fiction, but I think this was a nice, easy, gripping, thrilling read, and it was so I'm probably repeating myself, but it was so intelligent and so funny in an intelligent way, and the world building was really interesting, and overall it was really good. 5 stars easily. Okay. Next up is the second book in The Expanse, and this is actually only as far as I got, because I stopped halfway through the third book for various reasons. But the second one is Caliban's War, the second book in The Expanse. Caliban's War, even better than Leviathan Wakes. There was one character, this is not a spoiler, Avasarala. She's so funny. She is just she's so witty. She's so savage. She's a very, very funny character. And there were more point of view characters as well, which I thought was really interesting. And I liked it. and there was also more political intrigue, so I liked that angle as well. And then the other thing that I liked was, I mean, basically what this book did was it built up on the foundation that Leviathan Wakes established in a really good way, so it took all those things to new levels. The plot started out with the establishment of a clear, like, mystery, like there's an event that happens, and then the rest of the book is trying to figure out, like, trying to make sense of that event. And so in that way, I think the sort of the premise of the mystery was a little more clear, so that might have made the plot a little bit stronger. Not to say that the plot of Leviathan Wakes was bad, it was just, you know, you didn't quite know where it was going at all, like it could have been anything. But now it had this more clear direction, and things are starting to take shape, and this grand overall arc of the story is starting to appear, which is very interesting. So I like that. What else? There's also a lot more thematic development in this book. There was definitely some interesting stuff in the first book. In this book, though, we had a lot more about, you know, sort of the self-destructiveness of tribalism and the nature of empires, and that was a very interesting exploration. And again, just a really, really funny book, and intelligent, and the science was interesting. And it was really you know, sort of gripping tale that I just couldn't put down. I think I read this one like almost entirely during class. Don't tell anyone. But yeah, it was very, very, very good. And both of them had excellent world building as well, which this one continued, and again, sort of that like interplanetary politics was very interesting to me. Okay, I have already way exceeded the time per book, but hopefully we'll make it up on some of the shorter reviews. I just had a lot to say about those two. Okay, next up, the third book I read this year, this is a physical copy, yay, was Parable of the Sower. This one I read, I chose it myself with the group I was reading with, but it was for school. And as you can see, I put a lot of notes in it because this is so rich. It is such a good book. It's not an easy book to read. It's very emotionally difficult because it is dystopian fiction. But it's incredible. Now this is, oh, I forgot to say, Caliban's War, 5 stars. Now this is one of the most terrifying books I have ever read. Not because there are monsters or, you know, it's because it's horror. It's none of that. It's because it imagines a world, a dystopian world, where basically society has broken down, the US is a failed state, but it imagines a world where the causes of the dystopia are just the natural extension of the behaviors that we as a society are currently engaging in, right? So, you know, we're tolerating economic and social inequality, we're not addressing climate change, right? We're allowing for the exploitation of workers by corporations, all of these things. Parable of the Sower is just a dystopia where those things are taken to their logical extension, right? And this was written in the 1980s, I think. 1990s, or published then, and it's set in the 2020s, so that was a very jarring sort of timeline, and it was it was like a super terrifying and provocative exploration of like what will happen if we don't address these big issues, right? And it was just super thematically rich. The first time I read it, again, it was sort of difficult to get through, and I didn't totally get it, right? And it was just a kind of, you know, it was gripping, like I couldn't stop reading it, but it was also very difficult emotionally, and I couldn't quite grasp all of the thematic implications. But then I reread it because this was a book that I was reading for class, so I reread it so that I could discuss it more deeply, and it is so rich on reread. That's where all these notes got put in. There are so many angles and so many just like moments and little things built into it that just make it so rich to go back and see how all of this is being developed, and it gave me a lot to think about. So book number 3, also 5-star. So far we've only had 5 stars. I will say there will be a lot of 5-star reviews, and overall the scale is skewed towards 4s and 5s because I tend to pick books that I imagine I will like because I don't particularly enjoy reading bad books, right? So these will be skewed towards 4s and 5s, although I have picked some books that are 4s instead of 5s that I think will be a little, you know, controversial. But yeah, it's 5 stars. Okay, next up, Liquid Rules. This is nonfiction. I think, yeah, the first nonfiction in my list. This is the second book in this sort of series by Mark Miodownik. The first one was Stuff Matters, which I also read and which I liked very much. And I think I wrote a review of that, so I can put that in the description, link in the description. But this was a very good book. It taught me a lot of, you know, sort of interesting facts that I didn't know I needed to know about the world, but that sort of, you know, enriched my understanding of the physical world. I wouldn't say it was 5 stars just because it was good. It wasn't like great, life-changing. But I think if you're into engineering engineering or material science or chemistry or any sort of those physical sciences, this is definitely, this and its predecessor, Stuff Matters, are definitely interesting books to get into, to sort of introduce you to the applications of science to the real world and things that science have done for the world, in a very interesting frame. This one has a frame narrative, which I found a little bit contrived, but it was interesting, and I think it was a valiant attempt. So 4 stars. Let's see, next up is Of Mice and Men. Again, this one, or not again, but this one is actually, it's a novella on the border of short story, I would say. It's very short, and I do have a couple, well, there's this one which is a novella, and then there are 2 which are actually just like book-length essays, is their publication description, but I included them because there were things I read, and balanced out against something like this behemoth, right? Like 700 pages long. I'll say they average out to like a book, right, lengthwise. So I'm gonna include these. But Of Mice and Men, another 4-star one. I liked Grapes of Wrath a lot. Grapes of Wrath is very, very good. When I read it last year in 2020. So I got Of Mice and Men. I still have a few other Steinbeck's items to read, like Issa Eden, and can't remember what the other ones on my TBR are. But I got Of Mice and Men as this nice sort of like short infusion of more Steinbeck, and I liked it. It was very like characteristic Steinbeck. It had, it was very down to earth and descriptive, and the characters were very interesting, and there was just sort of this humanity that was the same thing in the Grapes of Wrath and the Pearl, and I liked it. There was ambiguity. There was this always constant underlying like argument for empathy and seeing from other people's perspectives. I am a little tired of reading about California, even though I live in California and love California. But I know a lot of Steinbeck is set in California because that's where he lived, right? But I would say overall 4 stars. Nice, sweet, sad story that did raise some interesting questions. Not super amazing. Okay, so when I said this would be one continuous take, one shot, apparently that was a lie because my camera stopped recording and I don't know why. Again, first timer here. But we'll just pick up where we left off, which was, I don't remember, I don't know if it cut off the end of Mice and Men or not, but Of Mice and Men, 4 stars. Okay, next up, boy, A Promised Land. So I actually got this last year when it came out in November, but didn't read it. It was just sitting on my shelf for a while. But then I read it, and man, was it great. So it was very, very interesting. I learned a lot about foreign policy, which I'm very interested in, and also and domestic politics as well. And it was just a very interesting look into what it's like to be president, and into this mind of a very, very much reflective and thoughtful and sort of complex person that Obama was, and I love that, and I think he has a reputation for being very, very verbose, right? But I think it was pretty focused and concise, and I enjoyed that. And my camera is switching, and I don't know why. Okay, but overall, like this was very, very good. It felt like reading fiction, except it's real, which made it like even cooler. And it just gripped me, and the narrative flow was so good. And he just like went from story to story to story, and it was pretty continuous, and lots of reflection mixed in. And overall, 5 stars. What's next? This, A Mathematician's Apology. It's actually a book-length essay, right? It's very thin. I thought it was a book, and then I ordered it, and it's like huge font and not that many pages, so it's really an essay, but I'll include it because I bought it as a book, and it came as a book, and I read it. I would say overall 3 stars. It had some interesting points, individual points, and like nice single lines. It didn't feel super coherent to me, and there were a lot of digressions that I didn't necessarily agree with, and of course me disagreeing with a book doesn't make it a bad book, right? And that's not why I gave this 3 stars, but I just didn't find it super compelling. I probably need to reread it to get a better sense of what the overall arc of his argument is, but I just didn't feel interested in doing so after I read it, so 3 stars. 6 Easy Pieces. Whoa. Yeah, I have a stack here that's chronological, but because it's chronological, like some heavy books are on top and like small books are on the bottom, so it just fell over. But Six Easy Pieces by Richard Feynman was the next one. I had high expectations for this book because I'd heard a lot of good things about it, and I will have to say I was disappointed. The beginning chapters about like the very basics of physics and the relation of physics to the other sciences was very interesting, and there were some beautifully written lines and beautifully done explanations of stuff that, you know, I'm familiar with from school and stuff like that. But overall, like these explanations of specific stuff like gravitation or quantum physics or the conservation of energy and momentum and matter, not super great. I think it sort of straddled the middle line between like light on math and heavy on math, and I think I just have to be on one end of the spectrum, either end, but not in the middle. I need to have a textbook from which I am learning physics and doing like physics problems, right, with math, or I need to have something that references physics concept generally, but doesn't go into a ton of detail, and I can skim on that surface level. But like this, where it's like half math, half not, I just didn't mesh with me. So 3 stars. It's a little bit difficult to finish. Okay, next up is another virtual or like digital read, The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This one was recommended to me by a friend, and I liked it. It was, I'll say 4 stars. The beginning is definitely, it goes from like super almost mundane and like nitty gritty to super high concept, like really fast, so that threw me for a loop. But overall, it was a very interesting conceptual exploration. The end of the book is definitely like a feel-good ending. It was, you know, sort of uplifting to read. Nice message. Didn't blow me away, although I was very much moved by the ending, and I did find it a very interesting book, but it just didn't hit that next level that I think merits a 5 stars, so I would give it 4 stars. It definitely has, you know, suicide and self-harm involved, so like don't read it if that's you know, upsetting for you. But like overall, it is a very optimistic sort of look on life. It kind of reminded me of, it kind of felt the same way to me as like the Pixar movie Soul, and from, if you watch Community, the episode Remedial Chaos Theory, with the same like conceptual idea of trying out different timelines or different versions of the same events, and that was very interesting because I like read and watched those things at the same time. But overall, 4 stars, pretty good. Not, you know, like the best thing I've ever read, but good. Next up, another Kindle read. I read these on an Amazon Kindle. The Song of Achilles. This one I know a lot of you know. This is definitely a sort of hype book, and if my eye line is changing, it's because weird things are going on with the monitor on which my camera feed is being displayed, and so I forget to switch from there to like looking into the camera. But anyway, again, there's like, I'm figuring out how to do this. But Song of Achilles, I liked. It's definitely earned its reputation for like ripping your heart out of your chest and then like puncturing it like a needle through a balloon, for sure. It's a very, very moving ending. I know the story of the Iliad, so they're actually the plot is, it is a retelling of the Iliad, which is, whoa, on my like the full thing is on my TBR, but it is a retelling of the Iliad. But she just brings it to life with her, you know, super vivid and gorgeous descriptions, and her brilliant characterization. So I loved that, and I definitely went through it during the ending. It was heartbreaking. I was a little slow for me in the beginning, but I think I might have been just impatient a little bit. And I'm not a super big fan of like physical description, because this could be a whole other topic. I don't visualize while I read, so that made that a little bit difficult to get through, which is an issue that will come back again in this video. But overall, I liked it. Beautiful ending, beautiful writing. Because the beginning was a little bit difficult for me, I'll say 4 stars instead of 5. But overall, beautiful book. Loved it. Okay. Sapiens, A Brief History of Mankind. Humankind, sorry. Again. This is probably the best nonfiction book I've ever read. It is as good as everyone says. It is just like, it really helps you understand yourself and humanity, and it's kind of a deep, like, comprehensive, from the beginning to the end, overall, what does it all mean kind of look, that I feel like has been missing from my soul for a long time. And it was so, like, insightful and so well written, with very precise language, and it helps me like understand the world in a more integrated, holistic way, and like 5 stars, easily 5 stars. I think the best non-fiction book I've read this year for sure, and maybe of all time. So, Sapiens, 5 stars. Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. This one, another 5-star read. It is such an interesting concept because basically there are 2 sisters at the beginning of the book who get separated, or who actually don't even know each other. But there are 2 sisters, and their familial lines get traced for 7 generations, and so there's like 1 chapter per character, and it goes like her daughter, then her daughter, then her granddaughter, then her granddaughter, then her great-granddaughter, her great-granddaughter, or grandson, etc. And it goes down, and it switches back and forth from Africa to the United States, or the colonial, the English colonies, right? British colonies. And it's a really interesting structure, and I think what that so it spans like 7 or 8 generations, and what that allows it to do is show how complex and interconnected and continuous the Black and African history is, and the legacy of imperialism and colonialism and slavery, and how it's not just distinct stages. They are a continuous process of evolution, and the same sort of traumas or experiences influence multiple generations of a family, and the way that each character's circumstances build into the next character's starting point in their narrative is super fascinating, and super rich. And despite each character only getting 1 chapter and then it moves on to either the other side of the world or an entirely new timeline with their child, you still really feel like you get to know each character super well, and so this was definitely very, very interesting and super rich to read and think about, and definitely gave me a lot of new perspectives, so 5 stars for sure. Next on the list is, again, I'm trying to go in order, Exhalation by Ted Chiang, a collection of short stories. So good. 5 stars. 5 stars, 5 stars, 6 stars. Probably the best fiction I've read this year. It's crazy. So the short stories vary in length. Some are only a page long, although that's not very many, and some are 100 pages long. And it's so good. He is so good at packing so much into such a short space and building this super realistic and compelling world that makes you think about stuff. And in the longer ones, he builds these really good arcs and storylines that are satisfying and thoughtful and surprising and really satisfying and rich in their conclusion. And they just make you think so hard, and it's just so beautiful. So 5 stars for Exhalation, hands down. Yeah. 1984. This one will be a, if anyone watches this, this may be a controversial opinion, but 3 stars. Out of the 3 books I read for school this year, the other 2 being Frankenstein and Macbeth, which actually, I read these in 2020, so they're not on this list, but those were 5 stars. 1984, 3 stars. I did not like 1984 at all. It felt very, I don't know. Maybe it's because it's been so influential that I'm sort of used to the ideas that it advocates already, or that it explores already. And so the ideas of, the danger of excessive government surveillance, or, impunity in the exercise of law enforcement or government power, those don't feel like new ideas to me. But overall, I mean, there were some interesting storylines and plot lines where I was like, whoa, and times when I was like, oh, what's gonna happen? But overall, didn't super love it. So only 3 stars for 1984. We Should All Be Feminists. Again, another book-length essay, really. This one is pretty short too. Once again, my camera stopped recording automatically, so I'll have to keep... I don't know why it does that. I think it's doing it at predictable intervals, so it must be a setting, or maybe it's overheating or something. I'll have to look into that. But anyway, I was on this one, which is number 15 on the list. So we're halfway there, and I've clearly done more than 12 minutes, even with my thing broken up into new recordings, I can tell that it's been way over 15 minutes. So not going to hit the 30-minute mark, but We Should All Be Feminists, 4 stars. It was good. Solid, strong, concise piece. I don't think it felt super new, but maybe that's because this was in 2012, I think, and in the past, like, decade almost. These ideas have become a lot more commonplace and accepted, which is, you know, obviously amazing. I just didn't feel like it was especially revelatory, although I do think it is a good introduction to the ideas of feminism, of modern feminism, and, you know, well written, not like mind-blowing, which I hope is a good thing, you know, means like I like sort of take these ideas for granted already that yeah, women should be equal, right? Yes, so good book, not mind-blowing, but I think that's a mark of the sort of progress of social attitudes since this was written. So 4 stars. Okay, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Another digital read. This one was, let me see, I made sure I got the other ones correct, yes. This one was a 4-star read. It was sort of slow in the beginning and kind of difficult to get through in the beginning just because I wasn't super into it. The plot definitely accelerates, and the ending is very, very emotional and you know, like it hits you. I would say sort of like Song of Achilles and Midnight Library. It's again one of those ones that's sort of difficult to get through in the beginning, but the ending is a lot of payoff that, you know, is worth the read. But it isn't fantastic like I think a lot of people say it is, at least in my eyes. It was just sort of a good read, nice warm read, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. So 4 stars. There was some interesting sort of theme. There were interesting themes about, you know, the concept of immortality and of living on through the influence you have in other people and in other people's art, and sort of art as a medium of preserving your identity, and that was very interesting. But overall, I would say not the richest thing I've ever read, and because I sort of had difficulty with the first half of the book in terms of reading experience, only 4 stars. Okay. Okay, so here is where I get to the break in my chronology, because actually I've been skipping like 4 books, because in, I think it must have been March, I read The Hobbit, and in April I read The Fellowship of the Ring, and in April I read The Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers, and in May I read The Return of the King and The Silmarillion. So, you know, now that I get to the point in time where I finish the Silmarillion, I'm just going to do all of Lord of the Rings at once, because I have this beautiful Juniper Books set, this matching set that my parents gave me for my birthday. And so these are very, very beautiful editions of The Hobbit. Oh wait, no, that was the Silmarillion. Oops. The Hobbit, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King, which is written down here. I didn't actually read from these editions because they were given to me as gifts after I read them, which is good because I don't want to, you know, invest in a super expensive set of books until I know I like them, right? But I read The Hobbit first, and The Hobbit I would say is 5 stars. It's a very short, delightful, you know, fun introduction to Middle-earth. I liked Bilbo's character. I sort of liked the internal conflict he had going between his, you know, his Took and his Baggins heritage. I liked the company, Thorin's company, and I liked Gandalf, and I liked the world, and it was a good introduction, I would say. Not, you know, like as high concept as Lord of the Rings, obviously, but it definitely sort of introduces you in a good way, and I enjoyed reading it, so 5 stars. Now, Fellowship, Two Towers, and Return of the King, I'm going to give 4 stars, all 3 of those books. And that might be, again, I keep saying controversial as if, like, a lot of people are going to watch this and going to have an art, right? Whoever, that might be an opinion with which, you know, potential future viewers of this disagree. I mean, obviously I understand how important they are to the history of fantasy as a genre and of, you know, fiction and literature in general, right? And I understand the hype. They are magnificent books, and I can see the richness in them. I just think that for me, I have to take that star off because of the reading experience. Again, I'm not a person who visualizes a ton when I read, so long physical descriptions can get sort of tedious for me. And there was the matter of just the geography and the lore and the history being so overwhelming to me. And like I mean, that might be a defect in me and not in the books, obviously. But I was comparing it while I was reading it to A Song of Ice and Fire, the series on which the Game of Thrones TV show is based, by J.R.R. Martin, which is like my favorite series of fiction books ever, A Song of Ice and Fire. And I did not have that problem when I was reading A Game of Thrones. Obviously, like, it was difficult and I had to focus to understand it, but I got the history of Westeros and of Essos when I was reading Game of Thrones and Clash of Kings and Throne of Swords, etc. I never really, like, fully, there was still, like, I mean, by the end of it, I got better, but even in Return of the King, like, half the history went over my head and half the geography went over my head, and I wasn't exactly sure where they were. Like, I know generally where Gondor is, and, you know, where the Anduin goes through, Anduin the Great, but I just, like, the geography and the history and the physical description was just difficult for me to navigate sometimes. And so I say for that, the series is a 4 for me. Although, especially Fellowship. The beginning of Fellowship was painful for me to get through because it's like, it's Frodo walking, and then Frodo walking, and then Frodo walking, right? So I think, like, prior to Tom Bombadil, it's just Frodo walking, and it's difficult to get through, right? But in Fellowship, my opinion definitely improved with Moria and Lothlorien and what am I missing? Wherever, right? Can't remember where they go in the end of Fellowship, but I definitely enjoyed Fellowship more by the end, and The Two Towers I think is my favorite one, and then there's Return of the King. But overall, I would say just his style was a little difficult for me to digest. It was very dense, and so 4 stars for the main series for Lord of the Rings. The Silmarillion, one possible explanation for why it was so difficult for me was because I read them not in these nice, enormous hardcover versions, but I read The Lord of the Rings half on an e-reader and half on, like, these tiny paperbacks that I don't think were the official authorized versions. And so the maps were very difficult to see, whereas these editions have, like, large fold-out maps. That are very clear and that would have been very helpful, but I think maybe the fact that the maps were difficult to see in the paperback might have contributed to my confusion, but yeah, there's that. The Silmarillion, on the other hand, is one of my favorite fantasy books of all time, which is funny considering it's, you know, like, within the canon it's sort of background material, although I know Tolkien intended it to be the main work originally, and then went on to write The Lord of the Rings sort of as an interruption to his history of the First and Second Ages, of the First Age. But the Silmarillion I absolutely loved. The Silmarillion was amazing. I love that history, and the Silmarillion was kind of, to me, what I have it over here. Oh yes. What the World of Ice and Fire was to the Game of Thrones series, The Song of Ice and Fire, in that I loved reading about the history of this world, and it made the world itself and the story of The Lord of the Rings more compelling, because it felt grounded in, like, such a detailed and comprehensive history. It felt like a real place. And I think reading the history of fantasy works, like the in-world history of those worlds, is what actually has made me, like, a real history nerd, in that, you know, if, like, Middle Earth or Westeros or Essos or, you know, Aman or Valinor, you know, can be so fascinating, the real world can be even more fascinating to learn about, right? So it definitely made me a history nerd in that respect, and it was very satisfying, and it gave richness to the world, right? So Silmarillion, 5 stars. Okay, we are at book number 22, and I am definitely more than 20 minutes in. I'm guessing I'm at like 30 minutes. It's difficult to tell because it says I'm 10 minutes into this recording, right? But we'll see. And we'll see when it cuts me off. I think it's cutting me off like every 12 minutes or so. But book number 22, another digital read. Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Now, Andy Weir wrote The Martian, and I loved The Martian. He also wrote Artemis, did not like Artemis, but I think this is sort of a return to what he does best. And so with Hail Mary, I think was as good as The Martian, and I love The Martian, so it's very, very good. The science is very good. He's got a very, witty, funny protagonist. What I will say about Hail Mary that I think makes it better than The Martian is that it's a lot more imaginative and it's more high concept, and it's got a bigger physical and conceptual scale, and it's more sort of removed from the actual world that we live in. Like The Martian was very conceivably like basically the present day, except a version where we've gotten to Mars, right? Whereas Hail Mary is definitely it's still present day, but it's a very different world. Like, it's been altered in a dramatic way. And so I liked that. I also liked some interpersonal relationships, which is the most specific I can be without giving any spoilers, that were done in this book. I thought those are really well done. It just, again, it was just really good exploration of science. Like, the science itself was very interesting. Like, it was a plot based on science, which I loved, just as I loved that about The Martian. Whereas The Martian, the problem was survival. In Hail Mary, they're solving a very specific, existential threat that requires science, right? So, sort of a different premise, but I liked it. And overall, 5 stars easily. Very, very good sci-fi. I read this in 2 days, and it sort of consumed my life because it was so good. As I was saying, I couldn't stop reading Hail Mary. I don't know why it keeps cutting me off. It must be some kind of automatic time limit. I'll have to adjust that to make sure that I can, because it's kind of a nuisance. But and it's going to be a nuisance to it's going to be a nuisance to upload 4 separate clips and then edit them together. I mean, again, not very complex editing, right? But it's just instead of just taking this video file off my SIM card and then uploading it to YouTube, I have to take all 4 clips off my SIM card, put them together, download them, and then upload that singular clip to YouTube, which is just a little more work, but it's fine. Anyway, Hail Mary, so good, better than The Martian, even though The Martian was great, which means this was spectacular, so 5 stars for that. Next up, I think that's the end of the digital book, so say goodbye to this Kindle, or this iPad. But now we can get into the end of this stack. I'm almost finished talking. We have, next up is I, Robot, a collection of short stories by Asimov about the robot universe, which is technically the same as the Empire and Foundation universe, but the introduction to that through a series of short stories about the 3 laws of robotics. Very good. Each story was interesting and funny and a sort of little mini narrative. I liked that there was this overarching frame narrative to tie them together, so that they felt cohesive and integrated into this one story. But overall, very, very interesting introduction. Introduces you to the concepts of robotics, and I think it's a good setup for the robot series itself. Which is, speaking of the robot series itself, now I will go on record saying I do not like these covers, although they are better than the covers of the edition of Foundation I have, which are positively horrendous. They're right here. These Foundation covers, actually the second one's okay, but the first and third ones, gross. Anyway, do not like these covers a ton, but they're okay, whatever. But these 3 books, all of them were 5-star reads. They were very interesting in their exploration of robotics, obviously, but more surprisingly, in their exploration of sociological questions and sort of, these socio-political issues between different planets, kind of like The Expanse, but sort of about, how do human cultures and societies develop in different ways on planets where there are more people or less people and robots play less or more of a role? And what's the ideal mix of those? What things are essential to a well-functioning, non-toxic, non-self-destructive, expansive and vibrant human society? And I think it explored those questions really well and really interestingly. So 5 stars for all of those. And they were also all very good mystery stories, and I like that. It's sci-fi, but Asimov sort of, I think this is what he intended to do, was, show that sci-fi, yes, it's a genre, but it's also just a lens through which you can tell any type of story, and mystery is one type of those. And so I think Detective Bailey, who's the main character across all 3 books, is very, very good detective, very sort of good mystery protagonist, and the mysteries are all murder mysteries, and so they're very well investigated, and he does the mystery aspect very well, so that was very interesting. Okay, only 4 books left. We have a nonfiction book, a memoir, Resolved, by former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. This was given to me by my Model United Nations advisor, my high school Model United Nations advisor, as a parting gift. And it is very, very good. It is, I'll go ahead and say it's a 5-star read. What I liked about this book, I mean, obviously I'm in Model United Nations and I'm sort of a history and international relations nerd, so content-wise, like, it covers a lot of different, it covers, you know, sort of all of the international relations crises in geopolitics that he went through during his career, as well as sort of the humanitarian and, you know, more broader aspects, other issues he faced, like climate change, during his tenure as Secretary General. And so the content of that was all very interesting to me. I also liked the inside look into the job of Secretary General, which, you know, I think is justifiably called the most impossible job in the world. And it's fascinating to see how he manages so many conflicting things being demanded of him and so many crises happening at the same time that he has to resolve, right? And so many member states' interests that he has to juggle while, you know, being faithful to the UN Charter and trying to maintain his integrity. And so I thought that perspective was very interesting. And it also made me optimistic, which is a great thing that any book can do for you nowadays, because, you know, obviously the world is going through some tough times, right? In terms of, you know, sort of the breakdown of the liberal world order and, you know, continuing, this is not a new human problem, right? But violence and conflict and climate change, that is a newer, not entirely new, obviously, we've, you know, still woefully late in talking about this, but a newer human issue. Like, he acknowledges honestly the struggles of diplomacy and of the United Nations and the failures of the United Nations, but still manages to apparently be, you know, determined that, like, we can still improve the world and there's still a point to this work. The United Nations is a good thing for the world, which, you know, I've always believed, but this really convinced me further and helped me, you know, be confident that, like, as long as I put in the work and as long as humanity puts in the work, right, it is still, I think, well advised to be optimistic for the future and to, you know, not wallow in despair about the insolvability of our problems, right? So overall, 5-star read. And in comparison to Barack Obama's memoir, which I think is a very interesting comparison to make, the prose is different. Now, obviously, he is not a native English speaker like Obama is, but his prose is a lot, like, shorter and more concise and more straightforward, which is not a criticism. It made it very accessible and easy to read, which I liked. And I don't think it's any less reflective than Obama's. He is a very thoughtful person, but I think it's done in a more accessible way. And the way it's organized is not chronological like Obama's is, and it's not like this continuous narrative flow. It's sort of organized by topic and or location. And so he organizes it into a lot of little bites of, like, topics and thoughts, and I liked that organization. It made it very, very clear and straightforward, as opposed to sort of like the more complex, like, artsy way that Obama organized his memoir. So a very interesting comparison. I would definitely recommend both of those memoirs, and they can kind of give you a sense of the different ways that people can write their autobiographies. But Resolved, very, very good. Thank you to my MUN advisor for giving me that book. I actually gave it to the 2 presidents of our MUN program, you know, sort of as a advice for them, just because I enjoyed it so much. Okay, next up, last three. This is book number 28, The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. I've been wanting to read a lot more Hemingway, and I'm going to do a TBR video, which includes 2 Hemingway books that are on my shelf over here. Actually, they're not on my shelf. I took them off in preparation for that video. They're stacked over here. But The Sun Also Rises was the first one I read, and this, I would say, is a 4-star read. I got to talk about this with one of my friends who had read it, which is very, very helpful. The beginning, I absolutely hated reading, just because it made me feel so, like, sad and bleh. But I don't know if that's because, like, I hated reading that, or because Hemingway successfully communicated sort of the ennui and the despair and the decadence of post-World War I Paris with The Lost Generation, and, you know, all these people trying to find meaning in Paris, right? I did find the sort of countryside jaunt into that fishing town I don't remember the name of, to be refreshing, and I really liked the plot when I got to Pamplona, and when I thought about it, like, I found this to be a really interesting novel, and unlike, you know, some other books, it's not like preachy. It doesn't shove morals in your face or, you know, make it like, you know, like obvious, I'm telling you this message, right? It's very much more subtle, and I think a lot of it is about just sort of experiencing this time with these characters and feeling what they're feeling, and you know, the prose is very classic Hemingway, right? He sort of reinvented the genre with his, he sort of redefined the possibilities of prose and literature, right, with his writing. It's definitely got that short, you know, spare, powerful prose that he's known for, and I think it's a very interesting exploration of that, and of, you know, there's a lot of ambiguity, and I liked it. So 4 stars. Wasn't the best thing I've ever read, wasn't the most fun to read, wasn't like mind-blowing, but it was powerful and rich, and you know, you can feel that. So 4 stars. Let's see if I can finish this video before the camera cuts me off again. Second to last book, book number 29, Baron and Luthien. This is not what I expected it was. I expected that it was just a, let me take this out of the cover. I expected that it was just a longer version of the Baron and Luthien tale told in the Silmarillion, but instead it's a chronicle of the way that the story of Baron and Luthien evolved over time in Tolkien's writings, and I love that. At first I hated it because the original Tale of Tinuviel, the original version of the story of Baron and Luthien, is so radically different, and I thought that like, it would confuse me in my mind about what the true details were, although I don't think I'm going to forget that Baron was a man, right, as opposed to an elf. But also I felt like maybe it sort of destabilized the canon, or made the real story less significant by including all these like alternate versions that were floating out there before he settled, or before Christopher Tolkien really compiled the final version of Baron and Luthien into the Silmarillion. But as I read on, and as it got closer to the tale of Baron and Luthien that I know, it was actually really an interesting process to see this story sort of evolve in different versions, excerpted from different works that Tolkien wrote before the Silmarillion. And it was interesting to see it evolve and sort of successively approximate the final story more closely. And it actually, I think, contributed a lot of richness to the universe. It sort of felt like the way that a myth might evolve in the hands of the culture that's passing it down orally, right? And so I definitely like that, and ended up liking Baron and Luthien very much, and so I would give it 5 stars. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get cut off in the middle of reviewing this last one, but let me put the Silmarillion back in its cover. The Silmarillion. I cannot stress how much I absolutely adore these Juniper Books editions. They are so nice to touch and hold, and I definitely had to consult the Silmarillion while I was reading Baron and Luthien for the map, as well as for the family trees of various characters, including the sons of Fëanor, or Finwë, as well as the sons of Beor and his descendants. And so it was nice to have this like hefty version open in my lap, sort of like a history textbook or a Bible, the Silmarillion. I'm getting like less and less fazed by the camera just cutting me off and saying like, recording has been stopped automatically. If anyone knows how to change the setting on a Canon EOS 60D so that it allows me to record for 30 minutes straight instead of 12-minute segments, that advice would be much appreciated, because I don't think it's a storage or heat problem, because the temperature seems fine, and I know I have like storage left on this SD card because it keeps recording, and because like I'm checking the amount of storage that each of these videos is taking, and it's nowhere near combined, it's nowhere near the total capacity of the card, which I just cleared before doing this. So tell me what's up. If it's just a limit I'm going to have to work with, then it's a limit I'm going to have to work with. But if I could fix that, that would be nice. Okay, last book. I have no idea how this is going to turn out, partly because I've been interrupted so often by the camera cutting off, and partly because I guess I've been absorbed in talking about the books and not like conscious of what the recording is going to be like. But I hope it's good, and I hope it's interesting, and I hope it's fun to watch, because you know, I've watched a lot of BookTube, and some of it is really interesting to watch, and some of it is not. And some style, like some creators' style vibes with me and the way that they talk about their books, and some don't. I personally like it when they're just talking the whole time and there isn't much filler or empty space, and so I'm trying to talk as continuously as possible, although that is kind of just the way that I talk. In that I just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And hopefully me filling that time with continuous talking is what you like to hear. If it's not, I'm sorry, but that's how this is going to be, because I don't enjoy listening to silence when I'm in the middle of a video, and so I'm hoping to not create that in the middle of this video. Okay. Finally, the last book, number 30, which I think we will have achieved after like 45 minutes of video, but we have gotten here. I totally broke my 30 books in 30 minutes promise, but it's okay, right? Last but not least, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This is an improvement over, do I even still have it? I might not, oh, yes. This is an improvement over the absolutely hideous edition that I had before. I'm not going to change the focus, so I'll just keep it back here. But this edition, which is super thin, like has this weird texture on the front, and it says Chump Change Edition on the bottom in this font with this like weird monkey logo. I did not like it. Was not going to enjoy reading out of that. So I'm glad I got the Signature Classics edition from Barnes & Noble when I was shopping with a friend. Thank you, friend. You know who you are. But I read this as part of a book club with a different friend who also had a copy, and I liked it. I thought it was going to be sort of based on the beginning, which was a very sort of like airy, tame, kind of aristocratic beginning. I thought it was going to be like The Importance of Being Earnest, the Oscar Wilde play that I read for school this year. And in the beginning it kind of was, and I was like, oh, this is about the Victorian aristocracy. It's about, you know, these like social norms and about their hypocrisy and etc. But it got, like, stuff happens and it gets dark, and I love that. I love that. I absolutely love that. I said I love that twice in the exact same tone of voice, but I love it. It was very good. It was very like, again, the beginning, like, it wasn't difficult to get through, but it was not like the most thrilling, but it was interesting. In the beginning, it seems to me like it's sort of about Lord Henry and his, you know, his sort of, his aphorisms and his way of seeing the world, and the way in which he exercises influence over Dorian. I'm not going to spoil this, by the way, don't worry about that. But in the end, it's definitely about Dorian, and it is like, wow, like stuff happens. It's very exciting. It's a beautifully written book. Like, I was telling my friend with whom I did the book club that I definitely had to stop and reread descriptions or read dialogue because I didn't fully absorb it because I was going too fast. I think I missed a lot in the beginning because I was just kind of like, you know, reading through it at my normal pace, when this is a book that definitely demands your attention if you want to appreciate it fully, because like the descriptions are so rich and beautiful, and you know, like there's this image of like bumblebees shouldering their way through the grass that my friend pointed out to me. She picked out that line. It's just a really beautiful book, and so the writing is beautiful, the dialogue between the characters is beautiful, and the themes and concepts of, like, you know, the difference between art and life, and the idea of conscience and the purity of your soul, and, you know, like, I'm not going to say more because I don't want to spoil it, but it's just a very, very rich, interesting book. Definitely one of my better liked classics. I will say it's interesting. It's very much got the, like, tame, artsy kind of, like, you know, sort of in this one corner, it's got this, like, Importance of Being Earnest kind of vibe, and then over here there are, like, I guess I'm comparing it to other books I read for school, but there are definitely sort of like Frankenstein and Macbeth vibes in this book. Like, there's Macbeth type stuff in terms of action, and there's ooh, that might even be a spoiler. I mean, it's not really, but like, it gets action. I hope that's not a spoiler. And it gets sort of dark and gothic at some points, which is definitely Frankenstein, and talks about, like, you know, this idea of, like, what is natural and unnatural to do with life or a soul, and very much loved it. So that is book number 30. Yay! Let me take this off the thing. Thank you so much for, if you watched all of this, thank you so much. Oh yeah, here's my background. Thank you so much. this poster given to me by a friend, this poster came with an album, those posters I got because I thought I was going to start recording videos. I wanted a nice background. Those are posters of King's Landing, the Southern Air Temple, Rivendell, and a Hoth. So if you like those, nice. But thank you so much for watching this long and hopefully interesting, but possibly digressive and you know, not maybe repetitive video. I think I'm interested because I write reviews for all of these books individually when I read them, and you know, I share them with my friends, and because I'm sort of under pressure to talk continuously, I feel like I may have missed things, although I think I did a pretty good job of giving a unique perspective on each book, but I'll have to rewatch this and see if I did a good job of that, if I captured all the nuance and like you know, different angles and perspectives that I try to put into my like written reviews in this continuous monologue, or if I sort of fell back onto the same, you know, verbal tropes and stuff, and we'll have to see. But thank you so much for watching. Let me show you the finished, this is the stack that we just went through right here. Let me see if I can focus. This is the stack right here that we just went through. You'll see some familiar over here too. There's my laptop, the list I was working with, and then there's of course my Lord of Rings stuff. But okay, thank you and goodbye.